Humanianity, a new religious call. Humanianity, religion for us all. Humanity, now we all can see. Humanity, how much better we can be. Hi, I'm Bill Van Fleet, and this is Humanianity Conversation number 35, recorded on February 21st, 2020. It is the 13th recorded conversation with my friend Mike. We talked about the important issue of the relationship between humanity and religion, and the potential positive and negative effects of talking about that relationship on the ability of the idea of humanity to spread, especially given the currently growing negative attitudes toward religion in Western culture. We also shared ideas about the nature of the three exponential changes of our species, namely, which of the three changes have been genetic or psychosocial, and how they are related. And we talked about the relevance of humanity to how each of us leads our daily lives ethically. Hi, Mike.
How are you, my friend?
Good. How you doing?
How's humanity going and everything?
Well, as you would probably predict, and certainly would tell me, it's not going to go anywhere, Bill, because you're associating it with, quote, religion. And that is kind of a leftover topic between you and me that I'm hoping that we can get back and address. But
yeah, I recall that the actual last thing about humanity was whether or not it's, I think it was whether or not humanity is a religion. And the last time we had talked to you, we had talked whether or not humanity was a religion.
Yeah, and it's not.
So I had
it's not a religion.
Yeah, and we had talked about all of that, and I had we wanted to talk about it again, and I really wanted to get to the mind-body problem book again. Mm-hmm. But you said you really wanted to talk about that one more time, and I said, okay, if you want to open that can of worms again, I was okay with that. But so I do feel that there is a lot of benefit and potential in humanity that is certainly harder for the main audience that seems to be drawn to humanity. It makes it a lot harder for them to get those benefits when it's associated with religion.
Okay. Now,
I would agree. Are we recording this?
Yes. Oh, okay. Yes. So one thing we could do is I could ask you to, without checking, without looking it up, to tell me what humanity is. And my bet would be that I would say that no, that's not correct.
Well, you usually say that. That's true.
No, but I'm saying let's. Could we do that as an experiment?
Yeah.
Because
I feel. I'll tell you what humanity is to me, and then I'll tell you what I think. How you would define humanity, and it's been a while.
Okay.
So humanity. Let's see. Humanity to me. I'm going to even go deeper than that. First, I want to the value that I take from Humanianity. The value that I take from Humanianity is almost exclusively the rational ethical basis of it and the belief manual and the rational approach to ethics and the rational approach to interpersonal relationships and problem solving and coming to agreement. Now, so that's just what I personally take from it.
Now, are you saying that that's what you believe Humanianity is?
No, that's not what I'm saying Humanianity
Okay,
is.
I'm hoping that you will give
Yeah, I'm getting to there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting to there.
Okay.
So, and it's been, so beyond that, what I think Humanianity is, and I'll get to what I think the actual definition I think is. What I think Humanianity is a burgeoning, very young, very fragile organization, a group of people who believe in the humanity ultimate ethical principle, which is, and make a long story short, I remember exactly what it is, but you want to live a life that causes as much joy, contentment as possible and as little pain, suffering, and early death as possible. And from that ultimate ethical principle, you derive a set of lower principles. So what I think the actual definition of Humanianity is that it's the recognition it's the recognition and it is the response to a movement that's already happening in humanity, which is that a movement away from, well, let me take a step back. So my understanding of the actual definition of humanity, it's a reaction to and a response, and it's a movement to support something that's already happening in humanity, and specifically, for example, within religions, which is a movement away from authoritarianism to more of a coming to agreement and a shared definition of what we believe in, rather than getting beliefs from a supernatural being or authority figure, whatever. And because Humanianity has to do about how we should live together, and the belief is within the Humanianity founder that that's the venue of religions, that people who want to find out how to live and how they should live well, typically they go to church to find out what they should do. There's a little bit of a link between Humanianity and religions, even though Humanianity in itself could be argued is not a religion, because it doesn't have certain features of religion. But in that context, some people could consider it a religion. So that would be the three ways I see Humanianity.
Okay. Well, that was actually pretty good. I think I can maybe clarify a little bit of it and improve some. Now,
you're breaking up.
Yeah.
You're back.
Okay. So I think that I was saying that I might be able to clarify and improve some, but that was pretty good picture of it. The way that that Humanianity is something that a person is a word that a person put on something that so far, to my knowledge, has not had a label, but it is something that is happening, just like you said. And what it is I would say, our third exponential change, making us...
That's the word I was looking for. when I said it's something that's already continuing, it's the third exponential change,
Yes,
first, second, and third. Yeah.
Yes. Well, by the way, do you know what the first two are?
One is the realization that the utilization of language and symbolic, and the other one is reason the scientific, based on those symbols, the ability to reason and logic and whatnot.
Excellent.
And the third one is Humanianity.
Well, okay. The third, now I want to clarify that, but yes, you're right that, see, our development to an almost infinite extent now of the use of symbols and the rules of syntax, giving us symbolic language and mathematical language and logic and so forth, that's made us drastically different from all other hominids and all other species and from the way we were at the beginning. And it's done two things. It's enabled much more intensive empathy. In other words, you can tell me what it's like to be you. Otherwise, just looking at you, I don't know what you were doing yesterday and why you are feeling so bad today and so forth and so on. And then the second thing is we can give each other highly specific instructions about how to do things. And so that made us more and more able to pass along and improve on our ways of dealing with the world. Well, then with the symbolic language, we were able to do something with that, and that was the development of the rules of logic that allow for highly internally consistent sets of beliefs, which might be correct or incorrect, and then the rules of evidence that allow us to come up with things that are much, much more likely to be so than something else. In other words, increase the probability of more accurate beliefs. And so that has enabled our science and technology. Okay, so what is the third one? The third exponential change is a change in our ethics. And so now people don't necessarily regard ethics in the way that I'm about to present it. All social animals have ethics. In other words, they develop beliefs about what they should or should not do based upon the reaction of others around them, especially those who are more powerful or scary or more able to reward and so forth. And so the ethics of chimpanzees and of dogs and so forth is authoritarian ethics. In other words, how do you tell what you should or should not do? By whatever X wants you to do. And X may be parent, maybe your local group, the culture, the leader, or a deity, or whoever speaks for the deity. But the whole idea is obedience, the ethics of obedience. And that's what you were referring to. So there is something that we are increasingly recognizing, and that is that authoritarian ethics does not in any way stop us from doing things that we regret. In fact, it really increases it, because part of that is our tribalism. In other words, we have our leader and we know that we are the good ones and the other ones are the bad ones, and we can go to war against them. And that's not any different at some level than chimpanzees that will sneak up on another tribe and go in and massacre it and so forth. And so we humans have been fighting at all levels, all interpersonal levels, parent-child, friends, primary significant other relationships, intergroup, and international, and all in between. So, so the problem is this authoritarianism, this authoritarian ethics, where you are, where you know that what you should or should not do is dependent upon the entity that is most powerful and is, quote, in charge and so forth. That does not work well, and there's something that has developed in its stead. And it's always been there, probably, to a certain extent, in the relationship between two individuals, where the individuals will say, you know, we don't have to fight each other to see who's better, who's more dominant, and so forth. We can figure out what to do that will be pleasing to both of us. And so you can call that the social contract. And we humans have recently been exploring the social contract idea more and more. And of course, democracy is an example of that on a large scale. And that is, instead of dictatorship, everybody sits down and we construct a set of procedures, how we're going to live our lives together, that is good for everyone. Of course, everyone in our tribe. But the idea is catching on more and more, and you even see it at the species level to some extent with the idea of United Nations, where instead of us determining on this planet how things are going to be done by war and by whoever is going to be the strongest empire, etc., instead of that, that we all listen to each other, we all talk with each other, and we come to understand each other better, and we try to work out that which is going to be beneficial for everyone, now and in the future. And beneficial, essentially, the question is, well, yes, what are we ultimately trying to do? And we're trying to have as good a life as possible. And what does that mean? Well, that would be, one Humanian has put it into words, and that would be as much joy and contentment and appreciation as possible, and as little pain, suffering, disability, and early death as possible for everyone now and in the future. So therefore, Humanianity is this movement within our species away from authoritarian ethics toward the ethics of the social contract by everyone, for everyone, with commitment to an ultimate ethical principle that is sort of like what I said. In other words, we should do that which will promote not only the survival of our species, but also as much joy, contentment, and appreciation as possible, and as little PSDED, pain, suffering, disability, and early death, as possible for everyone now and in the future. Okay, so just about finished. Now, the thing is, if we go back over the known history of our species, we can say, well, what has been our way of working together as adults to figure out what we should or should not do? What has been the set of social activities? And it has always been religion. Now, we currently have an anti-religion religion kind of movement in Western culture. And that's because some of our religions so obviously cause such horrible problems. And
I think it's more than that also.
I'm sorry?
I think it's more than that. I think not only is it they cause so many problems, but I think it's also that they, to a certain degree, deny scientific realities. And I think religions are seen to be antithetical to modernism.
No, right. I understand that. Yes, that's one of the, that's the thing. Modern science is the thing that has so stressed the religions, because each of the religions has, in support of their ethical pronouncements, or the ethics that is advocated for in that religion, it's been based upon a particular worldview. Like there is a supernatural entity, there is an entity that is watching us and wants us to do this, that, or the other. That's the authoritarian ethics. So, of course, our religions have been authoritarian-ethical. Of course they have been, because we are an authoritarian-ethical species that is beginning to move beyond that, but we're still that way to a great extent in our child-rearing practices and so forth. So, yes, in our Western culture, we've turned against religion because the worldviews that have been proposed by those religions cannot be supported by, and even may seem contradictory to, the findings of science. Yes, that's correct. But on the other hand, if we say then that what needs to happen in our religions is that they need to be brought into the modern world, and where the findings of science are indeed acknowledged and made use of and so forth, then that whole idea is the idea that religions can improve, just like a human person can improve. A child born into this world, it has all sorts of primitive impulses and so forth, and they have to be gradually controlled more and more and more. And so children have all sorts of behavioral problems and things they have to overcome, and they have all sorts of things they have to learn and ways in which they can become wiser. So if we then regard our species as being like one of those entities, then we right now are still just a toddler. We've got a long, long way to go. And that's difficult for people to conceptualize or to feel convinced of, that we're still... I'm sorry?
Certain people.
Well,
I think certain people would say across the board, based on our scientific and technological achievements, that we're always at the pinnacle of human development and we have nothing else. We have very little left to learn. But I think other people would say, well, that on the moral and ethical basis and in all these other ways, humanity is definitely like a toddler. But I think people that we both know in our social circles would definitely side with what you were saying, that humanity is not a toddler anymore. I don't happen to agree with that, but that's just me.
Yeah, well, the idea of being a toddler is connected to the idea as to how we might become in the future. And of course, there are speculations about that, but what those speculations are tend to be that we have gone as far as we can go. It's going to be artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I know.
And the implanting of chips in our brains or some such thing whereby we just pass this development on to AI, where then AI may, after a while, say, look, these humans are just kind of cockroaches, and so we need to kind of get rid of them because now we're ready to go, and that sort of thing. But no, what I'm talking about is our ethics, which we ourselves could engage in right now. We could drastically improve our ethics, but we have to agree on how to do that, on coming together and studying together, and always challenging our ideas to see, is there a better way of looking at this, and so on. So what I've tried to do in the website, Humanianity.com, is to develop a whole set of ideas that would be like a study tool to look at and review. And you mentioned the belief manual. Well, the idea there is that, okay, let's work on creating a, quote, Bible that is always in development, not fixed in time, no matter how many thousands of years have gone, but instead is being created always right now, and where the creators of it are you and me, not some powerful individual who is figuring out what he or she or it wants us to do. And so the and of course the website has the forum on it where people can go to discuss with each other in greater detail the things that they're trying to, agree upon and place within the belief manual. But that the belief manual always is showing how many people agree or disagree with any particular ethical principle or existential belief that supports it, and so forth, so that it allows people to share and compare their basic ethical philosophies with each other and to have debates about it and so forth. Okay, so that's studying, but people don't like to study. Some do. I'm not saying everyone, but in general, the effort is to just find out what, how to be a good person according to what one is told to do, or to rebel against that, or to develop one's own ethical ideas and so forth, but without much sharing and comparing of such beliefs. And so the idea of humanianity is one where, no, we need to do a lot of studying together. We need to have conversation, debate, and so on. That's extremely important. And it is happening to a certain extent. The intellectual dark web, is of that nature. And
the intellectual dark web, did you say?
Yes.
I never heard of the intellectual.
Okay, you broke up. You broke up. You broke up.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I've never heard of the intellectual dark web. What is that?
Well, I think that's what it's called. It's.
I've heard of the dark web, but not the intellectual dark web.
Yeah, the intellectual dark web, like Joe Rogan and Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin and so forth. Long discussions. In fact, just over the past week or so, I listened to and watched the debates between Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, each one lasting about 2 hours. There were 4 of them, and in which they really were addressing a lot of the issues that that I believe Humanianity is all about. And it was interesting the ways in which I disagreed with both of them, even though they are extremely skilled in word usage and are extremely intelligent and very, very knowledgeable and so on. But there's a particular area that there is substantial difficulty over, and that no agreement is arrived at, nor do I agree with either of them about it. And that has to do with the foundation of ethics, and but the issues are kind of complex. But Sam Harris believes that he calls ethics values, and he says that really values can be shown to be factual, that there are facts and values, but values can actually be a matter of fact, by which he's meaning that, oh yes, there is a definite right and wrong, but not based upon authoritarian derivation, but just looking at how you can see the difference between the most horrible kind of suffering and the just greatest way of living, and that is obvious. That obviously shows you that that's a factual sort of thing. But
what do you mean by a factual sort of thing?
That it's observable, that it's well, see, it's hard for me to steel man, I think is the term, what they their positions, because in the first place they never really define the use of they never define the word fact or the word value, and they build a lot of stuff on top of that. But anyway, that's getting into that's kind of going down a side road here. But getting back to what we're talking about, so the point is that our religions don't have to have in them the idea of an entity that is watching you and may or may not answer your prayers and is going to make life wonderful or terrible for you after you die, and so forth. That has been in some of our religions, yes, but that's a part of our being just a toddler. But our religions can move ahead and still study together on how to live a good life, how to be a good person, etc., etc. They can do that without using authoritarian ethical approaches. They don't do that to any great extent currently, but to some extent that is developing. And so in other words, instead of either having religion as it is or stamping it out. The third alternative is the improvement. And it's, in my mind, no different than instead of stamping out children because they are not adults, that you help children to improve and become adults. The only problem is that we don't have an adult human species, but we do see the wide range of behaviors and ways of thinking that the members of our species can engage in. And so we see some people that we say, boy, I would really like to, live that kind of life, or that is really a good person, et cetera, et cetera. And then we also say, that's a terrible way of living, and so forth. So we know that there is a range over which we can be, and the idea of more and more us moving toward what we would regard as optimal is the way to go. And so that can be with regard to our religions. So our religions, yes, have a lot of bad in them. Some of them really terrible stuff, that lead us to kill each other and so on. But that doesn't mean that religion has to stay that way. So Humanianity is a movement within capital R religion. It is not a religion. It's not a religious denomination. And it does not have a founder. There was just one Humanian that looked around for a word to put on this new creature that had not yet had a label, and that was Humanianity. But that it's just a description of something that's ongoing. It's not something that was founded by a person. And it's not a religious denomination.
Mm-hmm. I think that some of the reasons why that gets confusing for people, it's because of some of the way it's talked about and marketed. Like the shirts, the religion says the religion for everyone, and there's the use of the word religion in the website, even though it's clarified and in terms of what that means. But I think for certain people, like Sam Harris and those people, or I don't know what those people, Sam Harris is one of them. I don't think it matters what the thing is. If it's labeled a religion, or Dawkins or any of those people, which I personally have a lot of prejudices against, anything remotely connected to it, it's rejected out of hand. Common acquaintances like Chris, with Nova Social Group leader and whatnot, same thing. So I think that there's, certainly a large subset of people who will just reject that just out of hand, because now whether or not, like to the point you made in the beginning of this conversation, it's certainly going to impact Humanianity's adoption to what degree. I don't know. It certainly, to date, it seems like it's had a very significant impact on its adoption. Negatively. Yeah. Negatively.
Yes.
But who knows? Didn't you mention that you mentioned somebody who really took a liking to it, who has marketing experience and expertise? You'd mentioned something.
Well, yeah, but she came down with a virus and so forth, so she's been temporarily
out of commission.
Yeah. But at any rate,
meetup groups.
I'm sorry.
Did she come to one of the meetup groups?
No, and I'm not sure how much. I'm not sure where that will go. Hopefully, I'll learn a lot from her and get the idea of Humanianity out more. I realize that I have not done a good job of that, but I also think. See, the problem is that yes, I could take out religion and so forth, and I could maybe describe it in such a way that it would fit in with the expectations of others who would then say, oh, yes, yes, this sounds like a good thing. But that's, in my mind, tricking people, as advertising does, and it would not be honest. And so what I'm trying to do is to be completely honest, to really state the way I see things, and when I see that something doesn't seem to make sense, then changing it to make sure it does. So my goal, though it can never be said to be reached, is perfection of the website, for instance. And that's why I'm always looking for anybody who can find anything on it that, as it's stated, does not seem to be correct or seems unclear. And so I'm always looking for that. But at any rate, so that's, I think that that we've had a good discussion here with regard to this past issue that was still kind of up in the air about religion. There may be some things to expand on or solidify or something, but I have the impression that you're understanding more now of why I say it.
Yeah, I do, and you've said that before. You know, I just, you know, I don't feel that I can. Yeah, I'm not the founder of this organization.
It's not an organization, and I'm not the founder.
I was trying to look for words in terms of.
Yeah.
I meant Humanianity itself. Like,
yeah.
I'm not the person who coined the phrase.
Right.
Let's say that. I'm not the person who coined the phrase, and so if I was the person that coined the phrase, I'd be doing it a little bit differently. But so I can understand you wanting to be true to your own convictions and what you see this movement, this movement in religions and the world in general to be, and that if you try to kind of finagle it, you're losing. It's like you're not being true to yourself. I understand. And what you see to be true to the movement, true to the movement that you see happening.
Yeah,
but I guess the good news is, if it's simply the recognition, since it's simply the recognition of a movement that's already happening, whether or not whether or not Humanianity really takes off is neither here nor there, because it's already happening, whether people like it or not.
Well, that's true, but the way that I see it is that if it happens a minute earlier, that's some lives saved and some tragedy prevented. So, so I am trying to speed the process up at least a little bit. That's something that I feel like I can do while I'm still living, and I don't have too much more time. And maybe am losing some capability as I go along. But you had, by the way, said in the past that you thought about you taking the project on in your own way, and like writing a book or doing something, and I think that would be fantastic.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I want to move to review the mind-body problem book again.
Yeah,
in much more detail. So where I could take notes, and I would like to record it where I actually have documentation about what you meant and what the interpretation of certain things were. Because definitely that book was highly influential for me, and I think would behoove other people to read it in a little bit of a less technical format while still remaining true to the original text. You know, when it comes to Humanianity, if, you know, with me taking that over and doing that, in the interest of trying to get it adopted sooner rather than later to save those, you know, those people, I would not be willing to change the message, but I would be willing to almost have what's the word? Have a layman's description of it in a way that might leave out certain topics, just so you can kind of understand what this is about and see the value, and then have more advanced books that go into more of the complete picture of what it is, and to gradually integrate, you know, people, you know, that way into it. My own feeling about that movement is, I agree, it's definitely happening. The question of whether, for me, it's an exponential change that's fundamental to humanity in the way that language and use of symbolism and the application of reason, which seem to be truly an evolutionary adaptation. Like, humans will demonstrate language and reason no matter what the culture is. It's just built into their genetics. I'm not sure, and it might be very early. Like you said, it's very early in its adoption. I'm not sure if Humanianity I'm not sure that what Humanianity points to is truly an exponential change or just a development in culture and society. And
okay. Okay, let me address that, because I think that maybe there is a little bit of a difference in understanding between you and me with regard to the nature of this change and so forth, these changes. Namely, we're talking about, if we're talking about evolutionary change, meaning the process of evolution that has led to the development of newer species, that is a very long-term process that involves primarily a change in the makeup of the DNA molecules, and which ones survive and which ones don't, and so forth. Okay, now the first exponential change, the development of symbolic language, was made possible by, however it developed, our development of certain parts of the brain. That's not absent in chimpanzees who can be taught sign language and so forth, and great apes and so on. But hold on.
May I hold on? You just said something important. You said in chimpanzees and apes who can be taught.
Yes.
That's what I mean, where I understand that can be taught. And I think within linguists and linguistics itself, there is currently debate about whether language is something that's learned or inherent.
Okay.
I personally believe it's something that's inherent.
Okay.
I believe that if...
Well, let me to proceed, because I am dealing with, that's what I'm talking about here, is it is the development of our brain, of more frontal or prefrontal cortex, etc., that whatever it is, that enables the development of symbolic language. That does not produce it. The production of it has to do with psychosocial interaction between members of the species. And again, that does not happen in as far as language, as far as our verbal language and our use of symbols and so forth in other hominids or other species. But take a human being and make it a feral human being raised by a wolf or something, and that human being is not going to have symbolic language. So that is a psychosocial phenomenon that is possible to the extent that we humans do it only in us humans, but is there to a certain... chimpanzees can learn several hundred symbols and so forth. So it's not completely absent. The capability is not completely absent, but it does not occur unless one is learning it from the social environment. Okay, so
I'm
that
familiar
is
wait. I don't take that for granted. I'm aware of that argument in linguistics.
Okay. Well, now let me just proceed.
I'm not fully on board with it. But go ahead.
Okay. Let me. So then,
I understand your point. I'll put it to you that way.
So then, the development of the rules of logic is a psychosocial change. That's not some kind of genetic change that has occurred. And the rules of evidence is also a psychosocial change. And the change in our ethics is a psychosocial change. We humans...
Yeah, I don't fully agree.
Well, okay, but we humans, our ethics is formed by the culture that we are surrounded by, which initially is mother or parents, family, then wider group, and so forth. And so there are all of these different levels of social organization that we humans are embedded in and get our ethics from. But if we are not exposed to any of that, we don't develop it. We have the capability because
let me
of
explain
symbolic
why
language.
I understand.
Okay.
Let me explain why. When I said before, I'm not sure whether it's genetic or a function of civilization. What they meant by that, and I would agree. You cannot have a language without the genetic adaptation that will enable it. That doesn't mean that the genetic adaptation is the only thing that's required. But I will say that it's a necessary condition, is what I meant.
Yeah.
So genetics is a necessary condition for language. It's a necessary condition for reason. I don't know if genetics is a necessary condition for the third exponential change. I think that
I'm sorry. Say it again.
I don't think that genetics. I don't think that there's a gene that's necessary for the interpretation of, for example, moving ethics away from a dominant space hierarchy.
I agree. I agree 100% with you. See, so
now let me continue. So what that means now. Okay. So for me, since the first two exponential changes were necessitated, they are necessitated by a gene, and the third one is not.
No, wait, no. Well, I think just wordage here. They are made possible. The only thing that...
Well, if they're made possible, then it's necessitated. It is a necessary condition for you to have this genetic adaptation, to have language and symbol use in the way humans have it.
Okay. This change in ethics is based upon a necessary ability for us to talk with each other.
Yes, but it's that same talk also produces dominance-based a dominance ethical basis.
That was before That was before we even had symbolic language. Chimps have authoritarian ethics. It's based upon who is more powerful than whom. This is an oversimplification to a certain extent.
Well, that's even more to my point. And let me get to why. Maybe if I tell you the conclusion of why I think it's important. So when I look at that, and I think that, well, what would happen? So is this movement, is this third exponential change, can it be understood more in terms of this culture or human development? And one of the ways I would test that is through a thought experiment and say to myself, well, okay, if civilization collapses, what would happen to language? It would still probably stay the same. What would happen to reason and symbol use? It'd stay the same. But what would happen to dominance-based ethics? I think it would absolutely positively, no matter how far along we were, revert back to a dominance basis.
Yes.
Which leads me to kind of think, well, is this really a third exponential change? Since the first two would stay intact, but the third one would fall back to what it was, I kind of see the third exponential change to, I should say this, I see the strong possibility that the third exponential change is really a feature of an evolution of civilization and a more sophisticated application of civilization and social contracts.
Yes, I agree with you. I think that since you have the impression that we disagree, that you have a different viewpoint, I think one possibility is that you have an incorrect impression of what my position is.
No, I think where we might differ is I think the difference comes in the willingness that you and I would have as the person who coined this phrase to really put a lot of attention to people adopting Humanianity, whereas I would kind of see it because I just see this to be a function of civilization and an evolution of social contract, and as such, very, very, very fragile, which I know you see it as fragile also. I think I kind of, when it comes to where I want to put my attention, you know,
But see, I don't understand what do you disagree with me about?
I would be putting my attention more on the mind-body problem, and I would be focusing on the individual benefit you get from rational ethical living and Humanianity and non-dominance-based ethics, rather than painting this big picture of where humanity is going.
Okay. Yes, I think now I understand where the problem is. I am actually in agreement with you, but it has not seemed that way. And here, let's see if I can try to put this into words. You see me as thinking about Humanianity as a change, a psychosocial change that is species-wide or is manifested by large groups, as opposed to the issue of, well, what do I do about this thing that's occurring tomorrow? What should I do to handle it? But that is just as much a part of this. In other words, the question is Humanianity a big political movement of some sort, or is it how you and I should live our lives and what we should do about this thing that's coming up this afternoon? And it is just as much there. what the missing part is that that brings those two things together is that we have a lot of work to do. Each of us, you and I personally, have a lot of work to do to make better ethical decisions. And all of us do. We are faced with situations where, I should not have said that, or I maintained eye contact with that individual too long, or not enough, or I should have expressed my concern to so and so, or I should not have done that at that time. I should have waited till a little bit later and then done it, and so forth. And so that has to do with our moment-by-moment ethical decisions that we all have to make. And but we don't do a real good job of that. That's why we have so much relationship breakdown and everything. So if we don't do a good job of it, how do we do a better job of it? We do a better job of it by studying together. We have to hear other people's viewpoints and express our own and see what the differences are, and then explore why those differences occur. Sort of like what we are doing with regard to, do we disagree about humanity, etc. And it is a long process, and it is not currently a normal one, because normally we have ways of dealing with difference of opinion that are not like that, that are an effort to work at that difference of opinion, always toward trying to achieve agreement by virtue of accurate understanding of each other and agreement about ethical principles and so forth. Instead, the postmodern approach is, what's true for you may not be true for me, so further discussion would be non-productive. Let's go have a beer.
Well,
or
as somebody who is post, I got to admit, I'm very post. A lot of my beliefs are postmodern. I would say everything is true except that last part.
Okay.
Just because truth is absolutely relative doesn't mean that we should not engage in a discussion to see what truth is for you and come to an agreement.
Yeah, okay, that would be an interesting issue for us to discuss also. What's true for you may not be true for me. Well, what do we mean by the word true?
I think it's even more than that. I don't think it's what's true for you. I think truth is different from person to person. I think truth is confused with what is. What is objectively is. Truth is a human word that's reflective of a belief.
Okay, yeah, and here is we are using our words differently. I understand. So one of the purpose, but what I'm talking about is the necessity of continued dialogue, and people do not do that. People say, we don't agree about that, so we'll have to talk about something else. In other words, there is very ready acceptance of just stopping having discussion because of difference of opinion. And that is something that is so important for us to overcome, that we need to have as an ethical principle that taking into consideration all the issues having to do with time management and prioritization,
exactly.
and everything, that taking into consideration that still insofar as consistent with time management, that we should continue discussion for however long it takes to arrive at agreement, always with the ability to then revise and say, whoops, no, we still don't have it. That's what's so important. And that is not what people do. That is what is happening. The Harris-Peterson debates, that was 8 hours of them discussing in detail. Now, they still did not arrive at agreement, and I think part of the problem has to do with word usage and so forth. But other factors also. They both had excellent points in everything that they were saying and so on. But
here's the thing. I think when just kind of take and do an analysis more of I think what's happening, where the breakdown is, because on the surface it's so obviously a positive thing. Talk to people until you understand what's going on and they understand you, and continue to work on that. But I think it's when you add come to agreement is where it actually brings in a little bit of that authoritarian tendency, where it's becoming like, well, to come to an agreement, if I believe this and the idea is to come to an agreement, then I have two choices. Then either you're going to believe what I believe, or I'm going to believe what you believe, and that kind of stimulates people's, dominance tendencies.
Absolutely. See, exactly what you're talking about is on the website. It's under in the home section under challenge, and it is our biggest challenge. What interferes. And this is what it is described, exactly what you're talking about is described there. That is a problem, that we do not like the idea of agreement, partly because it implies to us hominids something like submission, like, oh, if we have difference of opinion, then whoever says
dominance.
Whoever
submission. If I agree with you,
right,
or the degree to dominate another person to a degree. But I think the valuable part in that advice to always keep talking is the opportunity for learning. You just keep talking.
Yes, but
you don't necessarily have to come to agreement. Just keep talking.
Yes, but the thing is, now if we're talking about something that has to do with that which affects the quality of our lives, then we need to work toward agreement. As long as there is not agreement, something is wrong. One or both of the individuals are wrong about something. Now, frequently what it is they're just wrong about what they assume the other person means by the words that they're using. Yeah. That's one thing.
I think that's getting into very questionable territory when you say that unless two people agree one of them is inaccurate or wrong.
Well, if the thesis, whatever it is, if whatever the thesis is, one person says that is so and the other person says that is not so, then logically those two things cannot be true. One or the other or both could be wrong. Both could be wrong.
That's a limitation of language and logic, not something that is. There are many theses that cannot be objectively evaluated and placed into a simple logical sentence that this is good, this is bad, and the opposite is the opposite of that.
No, I understand that. I understand that the issues are complex, but when people are talking about a specific issue, and one person says, I believe such and such, and the other says, I believe that's incorrect, then...
I believe killing children is bad. Another person says...
You're breaking up. You broke up. You broke up. You broke up. You broke up.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you now. You
broke
hear me
now?
Up. Yeah, you broke up. Say it again.
So
killing children.
One person, I was going to think of something different, but I think it was probably way too offensive and questionable for some kind of public thing. And I think this might be also. Let me take a better one.
Okay.
That one is probably too controversial. Alcoholism or drinking alcohol is bad. Another person says drinking alcohol is good. Now, I could see strong arguments on both sides that do not easily fall into a simple logical statement, one is good and one is bad.
Right, I understand.
And that's the evidence of that.
No,
for postmodernism.
No, I understand. But what that means is that the issue needs to be explored more deeply, because it may be that there are much more complicated rules of conduct having to do with, like, how much one drinks or under what circumstance one drinks, or things having to do with one's genetic makeup or whatever that make it not a simple matter of yes, that's true, or no, it isn't. But it's the exploration and deeper understanding that one is seeking. And but the test, if we come to an agreement, then we say, well, I guess we've gotten there now. Now hold on, let me say, well, we've gotten there now, so we can move on to another topic. But always we must be open to reopening the topic. So that's an important part of the total ethical principle here. It's discuss until we've arrived at agreement. But then, if we have arrived at agreement, always be willing to reopen the issue if something comes along, either to one or the other of us, or by somebody else that says, "Hey, wait a minute, there's something wrong here." But if you don't have if you don't have the goal that you're seeking to be agreement, then you're saying that, well, whatever you say, that's what you say. Whatever I say, that's what I say. And so, so why do we have to discuss it? And
I think this is such a big topic. I don't know if we can continue because I have to stop at 5:30.
Yeah.
I think this is a good place. Yeah, but let's just pick this up again.
Yes.
What's the goal? Should the goal be agreement or should the goal be understanding? I would argue having the goal becoming agreement, the goal is actually accomplishes what you just said. Because people say, well, we cannot come to an agreement with this topic, especially because it's phenomenological in nature. There's no point in us talking about it. Where if the goal is, if you remove the agreement and to say the goal is understanding, then there's really no argument against not continuing conversations.
But if it has to do with how to live life such that you prevent tragedy, prevent hardship, prevent suffering, prevent early death, if it has to do with those issues, then if there is a best way, then it would be important to keep working at arriving at that best way. If there is difference of opinion, one person may be right, both may be wrong, but one person may be right or the other person may be right. It's important to be right and to have as accurate set of beliefs as possible existential beliefs, beliefs about existence and how it works, and as optimal ethical beliefs. In our case, if you are Humanian, as I am, consistent with the ultimate ethical principle. So,
well, I think, yeah, and I think this is going to evolve into a critique of postmodernism. And I think
yes.
you're talking to a strong believer in postmodern.
Okay, good,
perspective.
because I disagree, but I think ultimately deep down we probably do agree. But some of it has to do with word usage and so on. But that would be fantastic. So maybe we could, for our next Skype, whenever that may turn out to be, hopefully fairly soon, that we can explore that.
Let's explore that.
Really great. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So let's we'll catch up later in the week.
Good. Take care.
Take care, Bill.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Now we all can see humanity, how much better we can be.